What's up, everyone? Welcome back to my EDH channel, and I thought this would be a perfect time to go over my Werewolves EDH deck featuring Tovolar, Dire Overlord, since it is the spooky month of October. Now, if you don't know what Tovolar does, it says, whenever a wolf or werewolf you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. That's a pretty good effect. But also, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more wolves and or werewolves, it becomes night. Then you transform all of your human werewolves. On its backside, it has the same effect that lets you draw cards, but also it has a effect where you can pay X, red, and a green to give target wolf or werewolf you control plus X plus O, and it gains trample until end of turn. So the Werewolves EDH, you play a bunch of wolves or werewolves, right? And then you play Tovolar, and then at the beginning of your next upkeep, they'll transform. So the idea is you flip the werewolves to their werewolf side. They have a human side and a werewolf side. You flip them to the werewolf side with Tovolar. And then Tovolar will draw you cards when you connect with the werewolves. And then on its backside, it can buff your other werewolves and give them trample so that you can get over your opponent's blockers. The idea of this deck is that on the human side, werewolves are kind of weak. But on their werewolf side, they're pretty strong. So if you have a commander like Tovolar, you can cast 2 or 3 werewolves, and then cast Tovolar at the beginning of your next upkeep. They'll transform, and you'll get a pretty good board out of it. And you'll draw cards, which is always nice. So let's talk about the best werewolves in the deck. Mayor of Avabrook. On its front side, it's a Lord for humans. It's kind of mediocre, but on its back side, it's a Lord for wolves and werewolves. So all your werewolves and wolves will get +1/+1. But also, at the beginning of your end step, which is really cool, so you don't have to wait a whole turn. You can just play it, and then it'll have its effect. You create a 2/2 green wolf creature token, so it creates you tokens, and it acts as a Lord. Gaia Reach Bandit's a 3 mana 3/2 of haste. That's all it does. It's okay. It's not very good on its human side, like we said. But on its werewolf side, it says whenever a werewolf enters the battlefield under your control, you may transform it. So that means that all of these humans, if you have this on its werewolf side, any of the humans, they come in, they transform, and you get the good side of them immediately. That's pretty sweet. Next, Instigator Gang. Attacking creatures you control get +1/+0. That's actually pretty decent. But on its backside, attacking creatures you control get +3/+0. That's pretty insane, especially if you have like 3 or 4 werewolves attacking. You give them all +3/+0. That's going to be a lot of damage inflicted on your opponent. Plus, it has trample itself. Reckless Stormseeker is a very good card actually on its front side. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gets +1/+0 and haste until end of turn. So you play creatures, you give them haste. Pretty decent actually, but on its backside, it gives it +2/+0 trample and haste. So you can grant whatever your biggest creature is. You can give it a buff and then give it trample so that it can get around your opponent's blockers. You can give a creature you just played haste and trample and +2/+0. Pretty good werewolf. Next, we have Monronin Shaman. Does nothing. 4 mana 3/2 on its human side. Does absolutely nothing. But when it flips, it says whenever an opponent casts a spell, it deals 2 damage to that player. Yeah, that's pretty insane. A lot of people are going to be casting lots of spells. You're already putting pressure on their life total by attacking them. So if you're able to flip a Mondronin Shaman into a Tovolar's Mage Hunter, you're going to put even more pressure on your opponent's life total. So that's pretty good. Tovolar's Huntmaster enters. You create 2 wolves. That's actually a pretty good effect. This card's pretty decent by itself, but when it flips, it does that when it enters or attacks. So it turns into one of those Titans where it has an effect when it enters or attacks. You make 2/2 green wolf, so that can get out of hand. And if you have something like a Lord out, or if you have something that grants buffs to your creatures, that's going to be lots of damage. If you have Tovolar out, that's going to be lots of cards you're drawing as well. We have more best werewolves. Outland Liberator can destroy artifacts and enchantments. It's actually a pretty decent card on its human side, but on its werewolf side, it says when it attacks, you destroy target artifact or enchantment defending player controls. So it gets really insane because you're just destroying artifacts and enchantments left and right whenever you attack. That's really great. And then it also still keeps the static effect. Wedding Crasher, its front side is a 6 mana. Well, it's actually 4 mana because it can cost 2 less. 5/4, but on its backside it says when it or another wolf or werewolf you control dies, draw cards. So it's a protection against sweepers, or if your creatures die during combat, you'll draw cards off of them. Anyways, these are the best werewolves, I think. And if you notice, on the front side they're okay, but on their back side they're really strong. Now, when you read Tovolar, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more wolves, it becomes night and transform any number of human werewolves you control. So if you have 3 or more wolves or werewolves, all of these will transform on your upkeep. So that's pretty sweet. However, you're thinking, if you notice at the beginning of each upkeep, if a player casts 2 or more spells last turn, they transform back. Well, if they transform back, so if all of your werewolves, if someone casts 2 or more spells, they transform back into humans, Tovolar on your upkeep will transform them back into werewolves. So, you have your werewolves out, you attack with them, someone casts 2 spells, they go back to humans, but then on your upkeep, Tovolar will turn them back into werewolves. That's one thing I wanted to mention, is that Tovolar will turn them back into werewolves as long as you have enough of them, which you should if you play the deck correctly. Anyways, talk about Werewolf Support. Immerwolf is a lord. Each other creature that's a wolf or werewolf gets +1/+1, but it also says non-human werewolves you control can't transform. So that means that even if your opponents cast those 2 or more spells and they kill your Tovolar somehow, they won't transform back into humans. They'll just stay werewolves. That's pretty sweet. Nightpack Ambusher is a lore, but also if your opponents don't cast spells, you make tokens, which in the early game, if you get this on turn 3, some players might not be casting spells, or some people might be holding up counter spells. This will allow you to get advantage off of that. Howlpack Resurgence is a flash lord. It's okay, but most notably, it gives all your wolves and werewolves trample. So what you can do is you can swing in with your werewolves and werewolves, and then flash this in when your opponent blocks and trample over their creatures. Full Moon's Rise gives them all +1/+0 in trample. The trample effect is sweet, and then you can sacrifice this to regenerate all werewolves you control. We have Werewolf Support that makes tokens. So Howlhinge Overlord, at the beginning of your upkeep, for each creature you control that's a wolf or werewolf, you make a 2/2. So this can get out of hand because it comes in. If you have 4 werewolves, you make 4 more wolves at your upkeep. But every turn, you're going to make more and more wolves. That can get out of hand, and you can draw lots of cards of Tovolar. And if you have Lord effects, well, these are going to become bigger than 2/2s. And if you notice, Howlpack Resurgence, Full Moon's Rise, they give them trample. And you'll be able to get over your opponent's blockers. Arlen the Pack's Hope, it's -3, makes 2/2 green wolves. And then you can have, it's +1, allow you to cast creatures as though they had a flash. It's pretty strong. And then its backside turns into a 5/5, which is, it's okay. Howling Moon, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target wolf or werewolf you control gets +2/+2 until end turn. That's pretty decent, especially if you give it to the one of trample. However, when an opponent casts their second spell each turn, you make a wolf, so it punishes your opponents for casting multiple spells. You kind of have a weird thing because Nightpack Ambusher, Nightpack Ambusher is the beginning of your end step if you didn't cast a spell. Oh my god, I read that card wrong. So this really benefits you for playing cards at flash speed. So you're probably not going to get tokens out of this, but if you have something like Arlen, it's +1, you may cast creature spells as they had a flash, and you have Nightpack Ambusher out, you can cast your creatures as they had a flash and make 2/2s. Sorry, I read that card wrong. Howling Moon. Whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, create a 2/2. They're going to be doing that, and you'll be making 2/2s. And then you'll be growing the creatures you already have. Next, we have the Transform and card draw. So, into the night, it becomes night. Discard any number of cards and draw that many cards +1. This is a really interesting card because it can throw away all your dead cards. If you play Tovolar and you're drawing lots of cards, you can discard any dead cards you have into the night and then redraw and hope to get some better cards. But also, it becomes night if you have any day-bound werewolves. They will all transform into the night-bound side. Pretty good, even Tovolar. So that's pretty sweet. And you have Moon Mist. Transform all humans. All of your humans will transform into werewolves for 2 mana. That's pretty strong. At instant speed. I don't know if you attack. So I'm actually curious, if you attack with your wolves and then you transform them all into werewolves, do they still count as attacking? I don't know how that works, but one thing cool about this is it prevents all combat damage to be dealt this turn by creatures other than werewolves or werewolves. So you can use this as a fog and as a way to transform your werewolves. It's a pretty versatile card, actually. I like that. So let's say you have a bunch of humans on the board, right? Your opponent swings in with lots of damage. You can Moon Mist, transform your humans into werewolves, fog your opponent, and then on your turn, attack with now your transformed werewolves. That seems really strong, actually. This card has a lot of uses because it's a fog and also because it transforms all your humans into werewolves. I think it's really good. You could also, um, I think, let me see. So if you have your humans, right, you could transform them into werewolves while they're attacking and they do more damage, I think. I don't know how that works. But also if they have trample, you just trample over them and your creatures won't die if your opponent blocks, you know. So that's another positive of this. Beast Whisper, whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Your deck is a lot of creatures. You're going to draw lots of cards. Realm Walker, you choose werewolves, and then you can cast werewolves off the top of your library. So these are some pretty good werewolf support cards. We talked about the best werewolf support cards. Now, we're talking about their deck strengths and weaknesses. So the deck can generate lots of tokens, like we said, and can overwhelm opponents. And the deck can be really explosive when the werewolves flip, because some of the werewolves are just insane on their backside. Weaknesses is that you're weak to sweepers. You know, your opponent kills all your creatures. You don't have any werewolves, and you just die. And it can be slow to start sometimes because most of your werewolves are going to be 2 or 3 mana, and you have to have 2 or 3 of them out in order to really do anything with Tovolar. So we have those weaknesses that we have to address, and we can lean on these strengths a little bit more. So we got some sweeper protection. We already saw Full Moon's Rise. This card's insane in this deck. So 2 mana, it gives all your werewolves +1/+0 and trample, which is already great, but you can sacrifice it to generate all werewolves you control. That's pretty good. We also play Heroic Intervention. We also play Rapid Vigor, which regenerates all creatures we control. So these will just give us a hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. And then if our creatures are already dead, we have Kessig Cagebreakers. When it attacks, you make a 2/2 green wolf for each tap. It's tapped and attacking for each creature card in your graveyard. So if your opponent wraps the board, you play this, you give it haste somehow, you attack in, you make tons of wolves that are attacking them, just punish them for wrathing. That's pretty insane. Kessig Cagebreakers can get a lot of tokens onto the field after a wrath, and then we have Fresh Meat. This has to be played after a wrath. You make a 3/3 green beast for each creature put into your graveyard from the battlefield this turn. So your opponent wraps, you play Fresh Meat, you make a whole new board. We have another way to protect us against sweepers, and that's the idea of an instant board. So your opponent sweeps us, and you have no more creatures. Well, we have to find a way to create creatures quickly and recover from a wrath. Howl of the Night Pact does a great job. 7 mana. Put a 2/2 green wolf for each forest you control, so you make like 4 or 5 wolves for this. In the late game, you have lots of forests out. You can make even more. The opponent has a Yavimaya. You can make even more of this. So that's a really insane card. Tovolar Top Master, you already talked about this. It comes in, makes 2 2/2 green wolves. That's 3 bodies. Arlen comes in, you make 2 2/2 wolves, and then Wolfbriar Elemental is one of the strongest cards in the deck. Multi-kicker, green, you may pay an additional green any number of times you cast a spell. So let's say you have 7 mana, you can multi-kick this for 3 green, and for 7 mana I get a 4/4 and 3 2/2 green wolf token, so this can make you an instant board. If your opponent wraths, these ways we can get around the wrath, get over the wrath, and recover from the wrath. We have ways to protect ourselves and get value from wraths, and now we have ways to make an instant board after our opponent wraths so that we can still threaten their life total. We have ways to get over the top of our opponents. So these, if we have our creatures out, we can just kill them in one turn. We don't have to attack for 17, attack for 17. Nah, we're gonna attack. We're gonna use these to attack for 40 on a turn. Return of the Wild Speaker. 5 minutes can draw you cards, but non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until in a turn. And werewolves, when they're on their werewolf side, are not human, which is really cool. So we can give all of our werewolves +3/+3 until in a turn. Get over our opponent like that. Overwhelming Stampede. Until in a turn, creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X. Rex is the greatest power among creatures you control. It gives them trample, which is sweet, and then it'll give them like +3/+3 or +4/+4. Pretty sweet effect. Really, this is just budget Craterhoof Behemoth. I like it because you can just deal lots of damage really quickly on your opponents and kill them. These ways, you can also use these just to kill the whole table once, depending on how much power you have. And then we have Kindred Summons. So this is an instant speed card. This card is really great. You do this at the end of your opponent's turn. You choose a creature type, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal X creatures of the chosen type, or X is the number of creatures you control of that type. So if you have 4 werewolves, you play Kindred Summons, you get the top 4 werewolves in your deck into play. Of course, you're probably going to have more than 4. You could probably have 5 or 6. Kindred Summons will get 5 or 6 werewolves into play. And then you do that at the end of your opponent's turn, you untap, and then you attack with your werewolves, and then they're likely dead. So these ways we can get over top of our opponents, kill them all, and these are just our explosive finisher cards. Overwhelming Stampede, Return of the Wild Speaker, obvious. Kindred Summon a little less obvious, but you do that to just make your board twice as large. Yeah, twice as large. One of the weaknesses of the deck we talked about is that the deck is kind of slow to start because all your werewolves are going to be at 2 or 3 mana. So I think it's important that you ramp and have mana rocks in this deck. We play 4 ramp spells. That might not be enough. We might want to play more. Rampant Growth, Nature's Lore, Farseek, the 2 mana ramp spells, and Cultivate. I really like Cultivate because it gets you land in hand so you don't miss your land drop. A lot of people don't talk bad about Cultivate. I think Cultivate's really good because if you miss your land drop, it's like you never ramp. But Cultivate makes sure you make your land drop after you ramp. We also play Soul Ring and Arcane Signet. We also get to play the werewolves that tap for mana or add mana on attack. There's 4 of them in here. I really like these because they're on tribe, so they'll count towards flipping Tovolar. And so we have Casting Naturalist. When it attacks, you add red or green. And until in a turn, you don't lose this. It steps and phases in. So you attack with this, add a mana, and then you get ramp for your main phase 2. Uvinal Captus just taps for green. Scorn Villager taps for green. Weaver Blossom taps for 1 mana of any color. And what's really cool is that when our ramp werewolves transform, they add even more mana. So you get your Tovolar out, you transform your werewolves. This one will add 2 green and has vigilance, so it can attack and add mana. Blossom Clad Werewolf can add 2 mana of any one color. So what's really cool about these is that you can ramp into your werewolves on the front side, but on your back side you can ramp into even bigger werewolves. I really like these. They're on tribe and they will transform Tovolar, but also like this is a 2/2 and it can get buzzed from other werewolf effects. Like it's not a bad attacker. Same with this as a 3/4, not a bad attacker at all. So this deck has 10 ramp effects. That might be a little too low. I'm not sure. You could play Birds of Paradise or something like Delighted Halfling in the deck to make it go even faster. I would do that, honestly. But you have to take out some of the werewolves that are not as good. But that's up to you. Anyways, this is the Werewolf EDH deck. We talked about the best werewolves. We talked about the best werewolf support. We talked about how to protect ourselves from sweepers. We talked about how to go over the top of our opponent. We talked about our ramp werewolves. Anyways, I hope you liked this video. Make sure if you like this video, press the like button. Consider subscribing to this channel. If you're interested in more spooky Halloween themed videos, I have a Tiny Bones deck tech. I did not make it for the purpose of Halloween, but it's a skeleton commander. That's he's a skeleton that makes your opponents discard their hands. That's kind of Halloween themed. Anyways, I hope you liked this video. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.